The sound of lasers echoed through the vastness of space as two massive alien fleets clashed in a deadly battle. Ships of all shapes and sizes zipped through the stars, firing at each other in a chaotic display of power. The fleets had been at war for centuries, each faction determined to destroy the other. For the aliens, space combat was an art, one that followed strict rules and predictable strategies. But today those rules would be broken by someone no one had ever expected. In the middle of the battle, there was one ship that stood out. It wasn't the biggest or the most advanced, but it was different. This ship was human. A small, sleek fighter, moving with speed and precision that was almost impossible to believe. The ship darted between massive alien warships, dodging blasts with ease. No one could track its movements, no one but the pilot inside. The human pilot's name was unknown to the aliens, and this mystery only added to the fear they were starting to feel. The pilot wasn't just another soldier, they were something new, something unexpected. The aliens had seen many human ships before, but none like this one. It wasn't just that the pilot was good, it was as if they were rewriting the rules of space combat. As the alien warships fired, the human pilot didn't panic. Instead, they moved with calm, calculating precision. The pilot seemed to know where every blast would land, where every ship would move. It was as if the pilot could predict the future. In an instant, the human fighter zoomed past an alien cruiser, and with a single shot, disabled its weapon systems. The alien ship, once mighty and powerful, was now a floating hulk, helpless against the unstoppable force of the human pilot. But the fight didn't end there. The aliens, stunned by the loss, quickly regrouped and sent more ships after the human fighter. They thought they had the upper hand. But the human pilot was always one step ahead. With every new attack, the pilot adapted, using the alien ship's own tactics against them. No matter how fast the aliens moved, the pilot seemed faster. No matter how many ships came at them, the pilot took them down, one by one. There was no doubt in the minds of the alien commanders that they were facing something extraordinary. They had seen many pilots in their time, but none like this human. Every attack felt too well timed, too perfect to be a coincidence. It was almost as if the human pilot had broken the laws of space combat itself. The alien forces began to feel the pressure. They had always believed they were the most advanced race in the galaxy, the undisputed masters of space warfare. But now, they were being hunted by a single human pilot. How could this be? A human, weak and fragile compared to their kind, was defying everything they knew about war. One commander, a veteran of countless battles, watched as another of his ships exploded in the distance. His eyes narrowed. He knew that the time had come to take this human pilot seriously. This wasn't just a lucky shot or a series of random victories. The human was breaking the rules of combat, rewriting everything the aliens had known about war. The commander called for his best fighters. He ordered them to hunt down the human pilot, to capture or destroy them. But as the fleet moved into position, they realized something even more unsettling. The human pilot wasn't running. They weren't retreating. Instead, the pilot was coming straight for them. The human fighter moved toward the largest alien warship, a massive dreadnought that had been the flagship of the fleet. This was the ship that had led countless victories for the aliens, the one that had turned the tide of war in their favor so many times, and yet the human pilot was flying straight toward it. No fear, no hesitation. The alien commander's voice shook as he ordered his fleet to prepare for the final battle. "No one escapes this pilot," he muttered under his breath. "We must defeat them now, or we lose everything." The human pilot, with no time to waste, maneuvered their ship into position. In a blink, they were right beside the dreadnought, dodging blasts that would have obliterated any other ship. The alien fleet could only watch in horror as the human pilot made a move that none of them had ever seen before. In a moment of sheer brilliance, the pilot outflanked the dreadnought's defenses, leaving the alien commanders scrambling to respond. The human ship had turned the tide, and the aliens were not prepared for this. The battle was no longer in their control. The human pilot, a single soldier, had just rewritten the rules of space combat. No one could deny it anymore. Something new was happening. and the universe was about to change. This mysterious pilot, unknown to the aliens, was now the most feared name in space. As the battle raged on, the universe watched in awe, knowing that the fight for dominance had just begun, and the human pilot would be at the center of it all. The battle raged across the stars as the human pilot, now a mysterious figure of legend, continued to defy all expectations. The alien fleets had never faced anything like this before. Every strategy they had relied on for centuries seemed useless against the one human pilot who refused to follow any of the standard rules of space combat. Alien commanders scrambled to understand what was happening. The human pilot had become more than just a threat. They were a symbol of chaos, a force that had shattered the very foundations of the alien military strategies. Every time the alien fleets sent their best ships to deal with this pilot, they failed. It was becoming clear that no matter how many ships the aliens sent, or how powerful their weapons were, they could not defeat this one human fighter. But the aliens were determined. They were not used to losing, and they had no intention of letting a single human upset the balance of power. The leaders of the alien factions knew that if this human pilot was allowed to continue their rampage, the entire galaxy might fall under the control of humanity. The stakes were too high. They had to find a way to stop the pilot, no matter the cost. The aliens sent out a message, calling all their best commanders to face this threat head-on. This time, they would not send just one or two ships. They would send an entire fleet, the strongest they had ever assembled, to corner the human pilot and finally put an end to the chaos. Meanwhile, the human pilot was not backing down. They knew what was coming. The alien fleets were assembling, but this didn't scare them. The pilot was calm, focused. They had seen countless battles before, but this time felt different. It was not just about surviving anymore. It was about something larger, about showing the aliens that humanity would not back down, no matter how overwhelming the odds. The pilot's ship, small but agile, moved through space with the grace of a dancer, weaving between asteroid fields and debris left behind by the larger battles. It was a blur of speed and precision, each move calculated, each shot fired with perfect timing. The pilot had learned to read the battlefield like a book, understanding where the aliens would strike before they even knew it themselves. But even the most skilled pilot could not do everything alone. The pilot knew that soon, the alien fleet would close in. There would be no more room to maneuver, no more places to hide. The battle would have to be fought head-on, and the human fighter was ready for it. As the alien fleet appeared on the horizon, a massive shadow blotting out the stars, the pilot's heart raced with excitement, not fear. The challenge had arrived. This would be the fight that defined everything, the moment that could change the course of the war. The pilot had no intention of running. There was no turning back now. The alien commanders, seeing the human pilot move into position, issued their orders with precision. They surrounded the human fighter from all sides, their ships moving into formation with military discipline. They thought they had the human trapped, that there was no escape. The pilot, however, was already several steps ahead. With a sudden burst of speed, the human ship broke through the alien formation, cutting through the middle of their fleet like a knife through butter. The alien ships tried to react, but it was too late. The pilot's ship zipped past, striking at the weakest points of the alien vessels. The explosions rippled through the alien fleet, and the tide of battle shifted once. Again, it wasn't just about fighting anymore. The human pilot was proving a point. With every move, they were showing the aliens that their arrogance and overconfidence had led them to underestimate humanity. The aliens had thought they could crush a single human pilot with ease, but they were wrong. As more alien ships fell, the alien commanders began to realize that this battle was unlike anything they had ever experienced. They had always relied on their numbers, their superior technology, and their well-practiced tactics. But this human pilot was different. They had something the aliens could not predict: determination, ingenuity, and an unwillingness to follow the rules. The alien fleets began to lose their sense of unity. Some ships tried to flee. Others hesitated, unsure of what to do next. The human pilot's relentless assault had sown fear and confusion among the aliens. The pilot had become a symbol of rebellion against their control, a figure that could not be easily ignored. And yet, despite their growing fear, the aliens refused to admit defeat. The leaders of the alien factions began to speak of the human pilot in hushed tones, aware that the pilot's actions were shaking the very foundation of their empire. They would not let one human stand in their way. They would gather their strength, regroup, and try again. But for now, the human pilot had proven a point. They had shown the aliens that no matter how powerful they thought they were, there was always something unpredictable in the universe, something even the mightiest alien fleets couldn't control. The war was far from over, but the human pilot had already taken the first step toward changing everything. The human pilot had become a legend. Stories of their incredible feats spread quickly across the galaxy, carried by the whispers of those who had witnessed the impossible. What began as a single, seemingly random incident had now turned into something far greater. This one human had managed to break through the most advanced alien defenses and survive encounters that would have destroyed any ordinary soldier. The universe was starting to take notice. But as the story spread, so did curiosity. Who was this pilot? What made them different from the countless others who had tried and failed? No one knew their real identity. They wore no insignia, no marks that would tell their story. Their ship was small and unremarkable, designed for agility rather than firepower. The one thing that was certain was that the pilot was unlike any other fighter the galaxy had ever seen. The truth behind the pilot's abilities began to unfold as those who had once worked alongside them began to speak. The human pilot had not always been an enigma. They had been part of a secret military project, one designed to push the limits of space combat beyond anything ever attempted. It was a project that involved the brightest minds in humanity's scientific community, developing new techniques and strategies that could give their forces a fighting chance against the overwhelming power of the alien races. The project was shrouded in secrecy, and only a handful of people knew the full extent of what had been achieved. The pilot had been one of the first to undergo the rigorous training, a process that pushed both the body and mind to their absolute limits. It was not just about becoming a skilled fighter. It was about understanding the flow of battle on a deeper level, anticipating every move before it happened and adapting strategies in the blink of an eye. The human pilot had learned to read the battlefield like no one else could. But the project had been abandoned. The risks were too high. The technology, though groundbreaking, was still in its infancy, and the consequences of pushing it further were unpredictable. Some argued that it was too dangerous to continue, while others believed that humanity could not afford to give up such an advantage. In the end, the project was deemed a failure and shut down, leaving the pilot to disappear into obscurity. But the pilot had not given up. They had continued to train, to refine their skills in secret. When the war with the alien forces began, the pilot saw an opportunity to put everything they had learned to the test. They took to the stars, their every move a reflection of the years of preparation and discipline they had endured. The aliens, for all their might and technology, had never seen anything like it. Now, as the human pilot's reputation grew, so did the sense of urgency among the alien commanders. They began to realize that they were not dealing with an ordinary human. This pilot had mastered combat techniques that were beyond the understanding of even the most seasoned alien warriors. They were rewriting the very rules of space combat, making it clear that the galaxy's power dynamics were about to shift. Behind closed doors, the alien leaders held secret meetings, discussing the human pilot with growing concern. They knew they had to find a way to neutralize this threat before it spiraled out of control. Their initial strategy of overwhelming force had failed. The pilot had proven time and again that they could outsmart, outmaneuver, and outlast anything the aliens sent their way. It was no longer a matter of simply defeating them. It was a matter of understanding how to defeat someone who could see the future of a battle unfold in real time. The alien commanders began to change their tactics. They knew that brute force alone would not work. Instead, they decided to send their finest minds, strategists and tacticians who could analyze the human pilot's every move and learn from it. The aliens believed that by studying the pilot's patterns, they could predict their next steps and finally find a way to corner them. But the human pilot was always one step ahead. The pilot had anticipated that the aliens would begin to adapt, and they had prepared for it. Every move the aliens made, every strategy they devised was met with a counter-strategy that no one could have predicted. The human pilot seemed to be 2 steps ahead at all times, always ready to adapt and change course as needed. The more the aliens studied the human pilot, the more they realized just how much they had underestimated them. What they had thought was luck, or perhaps a series of fortunate coincidences, was in fact the result of years of meticulous preparation. The human pilot wasn't just lucky. They had a deeper understanding of combat than anyone could have imagined. It was not a gift or a skill that could be replicated easily. It was a culmination of everything they had learned in the abandoned program, and it made them an unstoppable force. But as the alien commanders scrambled to catch up, something else was happening. The human pilot's actions were beginning to spark a movement among the other human fighters. Word of their success spread even further, reaching soldiers and commanders who had once felt powerless against the alien forces. They began to look to the pilot as a symbol of hope, a reminder that humanity was capable of far more than anyone had ever believed. The pilot, though still operating alone, had unknowingly become the heart of a larger rebellion. Their victory was not just a victory for one person, but for all of humanity. The aliens had underestimated the resolve and ingenuity of humans, and they were about to learn the hard way that humanity would never give up without a fight. The battle for the galaxy had only just begun, and the mysterious pilot was at its center, ready to lead the charge. The tides of war had begun to change, and the human pilot, once an unknown figure in the vastness of space, was now a symbol of hope. Across the galaxy, whispers spread of their bravery, their impossible feats, and the uncanny way they had outsmarted the alien fleets. What had once been a single pilot defying the odds had transformed into a movement, a beacon of resistance that humans everywhere could rally behind. As the alien commanders grew more desperate, they knew that if they did not act swiftly, they would lose their grip on the galaxy. The human pilot had already dismantled their most trusted tactics, breaking apart their strategies with every encounter. What had started as a rogue element was now threatening to turn the entire war in humanity's favor. The aliens realized that it wasn't just about the pilot anymore. The very idea of humans challenging their power was something they could not allow to take root. But the human pilot was not only a skilled fighter, they were a leader. The movements they had made in battle, the choices they had taken, all spoke of a deep understanding of strategy. It was clear that the pilot wasn't just reacting to the enemies they faced, they were creating a new way of thinking about warfare, one that could not be easily understood or predicted by the alien commanders. While the alien forces prepared for their next big offensive, something unexpected happened. The stories of the human pilot inspired other factions, other military commanders who had long been under the control of the alien powers. These commanders began to question their allegiance. They saw the human pilot as a symbol of courage and determination, a force that could stand up to the unbeatable aliens, defy their might, and turn the tide in humanity's favor. Soon, these stories spread even further. Fleet commanders, soldiers, and pilots from all corners of the galaxy began to listen. They began to train harder, smarter. They studied the pilot's tactics, each movement, each decision, hoping to learn from the one who had done the impossible. The very idea that one human could stand against the might of the alien fleets was enough to inspire countless others to join the cause. It wasn't long before new alliances began to form. Small factions of humans and other species, once divided by fear and hopelessness, now united under a common banner. They didn't have the advanced technology of the aliens, but they had something else: resilience, creativity, and the unwavering belief that they could overcome the impossible. They shared stories of the pilot, of their impossible victories, and used these as fuel for their own fight. They had seen what one human could do, and they believed they could do it too. Meanwhile, the human pilot, now aware of the growing movement, did not rest. The pilot knew that their role had changed. No longer just a lone fighter in the vastness of space, they had become the symbol of humanity's defiance. The pressure was mounting, and every decision now carried the weight of the hopes of millions. The pilot understood that their actions were no longer just about survival. They were about inspiring a future, one where humanity had a real chance at winning. Despite the rising hope, the alien forces were not sitting idly by. They were regrouping, preparing for their own counteroffensive. But this time, things were different. The aliens knew that they could no longer rely on the same tactics that had worked for centuries. They had underestimated the human pilot, and now they were paying the price. In their desperation, the aliens began to make mistakes. They split their forces too thin, assuming that one human pilot could not possibly rally an entire galaxy. They underestimated the power of unity, the strength that came when multiple forces worked together for a common goal. They underestimated how far the human spirit could go when pushed to its limit. They underestimated the ripple effect that one person's bravery could have on an entire universe. The human pilot, however, did not act alone. They had become the leader of a growing resistance, one that was determined to stand against the alien empire. With every victory, more people joined the cause. The battles that had once seemed impossible were now met with the combined strength of thousands, all following the lead of a single, determined individual. It was no longer just about the human pilot. It was about the potential of humanity, of what they could achieve when united. The pilot had become more than just a warrior. They had become the heart of a revolution, a spark that ignited a fire of hope in the darkest corners of the galaxy. The aliens had started a war they thought would be easy to win, but they had unwittingly awoken something far greater, a determination in humanity to never give up, no matter the odds. As the human pilot prepared for the next chapter of their journey, they could feel the shift in the air. The aliens were getting nervous, but so were the humans. Nervous not for the battle ahead, but for what they had to lose. They had learned to fight, to survive, and now they were learning how to win. The galaxy was on the verge of something incredible. Humanity was no longer just defending their right to exist. They were fighting for their future. And at the center of it all stood the human pilot, the one who had defied the impossible and shown the galaxy that nothing was beyond their reach. The war had entered a new phase, one where humanity was no longer merely surviving, but actively challenging the alien empire that had once seemed unstoppable. The human pilot, the heart of this resistance, had become a symbol of what was possible when humanity refused to accept defeat. As the tide turned, the pilot knew they had to take on an even greater challenge, leading a fractured galaxy, united in purpose, into the next stage of the fight. Despite the growing number of forces joining the resistance, not everything was simple. The vastness of space, the complexity of the galaxy's different factions, and the deep-rooted fears of the unknown created divisions within the ranks. Some felt that humanity should rely solely on its own strength, focusing on Earth's resources and technologies. Others believed in uniting with different species who had suffered under alien rule. The resistance was strong, but it was not yet one cohesive force. The human pilot knew that this disunity could be the downfall of their efforts. It would take more than just defeating the alien forces to secure the galaxy's freedom. They would need to create lasting alliances that could hold, even after the war was won. And while the pilot had become an expert in space combat, navigating the political and diplomatic terrain of a united front was something entirely new. They spent hours in private meetings with leaders from different factions, some human, some alien. These leaders, once hesitant and distrustful of each other, now found themselves working together under the pilot's guidance. Every word mattered now. Every gesture had the weight of a galaxy behind it. The pilot's reputation for thinking outside the box, finding solutions when none seemed possible, became their greatest asset. Where others saw obstacles, the pilot saw opportunities to unite, to build a future where all species could stand, side by side. The alien empire, meanwhile, was not blind to these changes. Their commanders, once confident in their unchallenged rule, were now facing something they had never anticipated: unity among the humans and their allies. They had underestimated the potential of these alliances and the power that came with them. The alien forces had been the dominant power for centuries, but as the resistance grew, cracks began to show in their once impenetrable armor. Still, the aliens were relentless. They sent their best diplomats to try and break apart the fragile alliances, offering peace or promises of power to those who would defect. But the human pilot, ever vigilant, understood the importance of trust. They knew that one wrong move, one betrayal, could unravel everything. So the pilot continued to build the network of alliances, working tirelessly to ensure that humanity's allies would not be swayed by empty promises. It was during this time that the human pilot's reputation reached its peak. Across the galaxy, their name was whispered with respect and admiration. They had achieved what many thought impossible, defying the odds, outsmarting the enemy, and bringing together a fractured galaxy. It wasn't just the pilot's skills in combat that had made them a hero. It was their ability to inspire, to lead when leadership was most needed. The resistance forces, once scattered and divided, began to train together, sharing tactics and knowledge. They learned from each other, and under the pilot's guidance they started to develop new techniques, new ways of thinking about space warfare. The enemy, with their overwhelming numbers and superior technology, were now facing an opponent that was more than just a military force. The resistance was becoming a revolution, one that sought not just to fight back but to change the very fabric of the galaxy. As the pilot continued to guide the resistance, they found themselves thinking not just about the immediate future, but the long-term one. The galaxy, after all, would need more than just defense against the alien empire. It would need a vision, something to unite it after the dust of war had settled. The pilot knew that their role had evolved once again. They were no longer just a fighter or a leader. They had become a symbol of the galaxy's future, a future where all species could live in harmony, working together instead of being bound by fear and division. The pilot's eyes, once focused solely on the enemy's ships and strategies, now found themselves cast upon the horizon of a new world. A world where humanity could contribute to the galaxy, not as subjugated creatures but as equals, as creators, as leaders. The war was far from over, but the groundwork for peace was slowly being laid. It would take time, and there would be sacrifices, but the pilot knew that the day would come when the war would end, not in defeat but in victory. In the heart of the resistance, a quiet sense of hope began to take root. The alliances, once fragile and tentative, had grown strong. The pilot had shown the galaxy that despite the overwhelming forces of the alien empire, humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their ability to unite, to fight for something greater than themselves. And, as the battle for the future of the galaxy raged on, humanity's resolve would be tested, but the pilot's leadership would continue to guide them toward a future they had once only dreamed of. The final chapter of the war had begun, and with it the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. The human pilot, now regarded as more than a mere fighter, had become a symbol of resilience and unity. Their leadership had shaped the resistance into a force that no longer operated from the shadows. Instead, it had grown into a powerful, cohesive entity, one that could finally challenge the alien empire head-on. But the final push would not be easy. The alien empire, despite its weakening hold, still controlled vast swaths of space, and their military might was formidable. The resistance, though growing stronger with each passing day, was still vastly outnumbered and under-resourced. The Yar, pilot who had once fought alone, now stood at the head of an army of allies, each one bringing their strengths and skills to the table. But the question remained, was it enough to overcome the alien juggernaut? The pilot knew the time had come to lead their forces into the heart of the alien empire. No longer would they hide or fight from the fringes. The enemy had underestimated humanity for too long, and now the pilot would show them the true power of unity and courage. Every member of the resistance, human and alien alike, knew that this final assault was not just about victory in battle. It was about something much more important, securing a future where freedom could flourish, where the galaxy could finally heal from the scars of war. The plan for the final assault was bold. The pilot had spent countless hours coordinating with their allies, studying the enemy's strategies and formulating a plan that would take them to the heart of the alien-controlled systems. The idea was not just to strike a decisive blow, but to hit at the core of the alien empire's control. If they could capture the central command hub, disrupt the alien leadership, and show the galaxy that their reign was no longer unchallenged, it would change everything. As the time for the assault drew nearer, the pilot gathered their closest allies. They sat together, reviewing the final steps of the plan. Despite the tension in the air, there was a sense of determination among them. They had come this far because they had refused to back down, to accept defeat. Each person in that room had their own reasons for joining the resistance, their own stories of hardship, but they all shared the same goal: to see the galaxy freed from alien oppression. The pilot's mind was focused, but even they could not help but feel the weight of the moment. They knew that the path ahead would not be easy, and there would be many who would fall along the way. But they also knew that their leadership, their vision, had brought humanity to this point. It was a point of no return. The pilot's eyes flickered across the faces of those gathered, and they knew that this moment was not just about a battle. It was about the promise of a better future. As the fleet of resistance ships assembled, ready to strike, the pilot made one last decision. They would lead the charge. Their ship, small and nimble, would be at the forefront of the attack. They knew that the aliens would be expecting a large, coordinated fleet, but the pilot's ship was different. It was designed for agility, to move quickly and slip past even the most formidable defenses. In that moment, the pilot realized that the victory they sought would not be found in brute force alone, but in the ability to outthink, to outmaneuver, and to inspire others to do the same. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The alien forces, taken by surprise at the speed and precision of the Resistance's assault, scrambled to defend their key strongholds. The pilot moved with a confidence that only came from years of experience and countless victories. They saw the battlefield with clarity, each move calculated and deliberate. The resistance forces, following the pilot's lead, adapted quickly, finding new ways to approach the enemy's defenses and exploiting their weaknesses. But as the battle raged, something unexpected happened. The alien forces, despite their initial surprise, began to regroup. They were learning from the Resistance's tactics, adapting and evolving in real time. It became clear that this was not going to be a battle won through sheer force. It would require more than just fighting. It would require the Resistance to outsmart, to outmaneuver, and to stay true to the principles that had guided them from the very beginning. The human pilot, ever the strategist, saw the shift in the battle and immediately adapted their approach. They ordered the Resistance fleet to divide into smaller, more agile units, taking advantage of the enemy's confusion. The aliens, now realizing that they were up against something entirely new, could no longer rely on their traditional tactics. They had underestimated the human pilot, and now they were paying the price. In the heat of the conflict, the pilot's ship made its way toward the alien command center. The Resistance forces had carved a path through the enemy's defenses, but the final stretch would be the most perilous. The alien leaders, realizing the gravity of the situation, desperately called for reinforcements. But it was too late. The pilot had already outmaneuvered them, already reached the core of their operations. As the pilot's ship descended into the heart of the alien command center, they were met with a final, chilling silence. The once mighty alien empire, which had ruled over the galaxy for so long, was now on the brink of collapse. The Resistance forces surged forward, breaking through the last of the alien defenses, and in that moment, the pilot knew that the galaxy would never be the same again. The battle was over. The alien empire had been defeated, its leaders taken down, and the galaxy was free. But the true victory was not in the battle itself. It was in the realization that humanity, united and resolute, had shown the galaxy that no force, no empire, could ever truly hold them down. The pilot, though exhausted from the trials they had faced, stood tall as the symbol of that victory. Their journey had been one of impossible odds, of defying expectations, but in the end, it had all been worth it. The galaxy would rebuild. It would heal. And the human pilot, the one who had sparked a revolution and led humanity to victory, would be remembered as the one who proved that anything was possible when you refused to give up.